When people at Notre Dame want to hang out, chill out, or geek out, they go to the Quad.
When they want to play, pray, or just get away, they go to the Quad.
The Quad's a place to talk about important ideas with good friends.
And that's what we do here on the Pod Quad Show. We're two Holy Cross priests and friends having curiosity conversations with interesting people. Talking about life. And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, Pod Quad Nation, we have made it to episode 4. Nate, can you believe that we actually made it to 4 episodes?
I'm not really.
All right, so here's my question for you right out of the gate on our 4th
Number 4
episode of the Pod Quad.
Big 4.
What is your favorite foursome?
You gotta go with the 4 evangelists: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Okay.
I mean, that's a strong start, right?
Yeah, it's a very strong start,
All right,
but that suggests that anything I say will be somehow less than.
No. That's when you start like, oh, who do you know that's a good person? And people are like, Jesus. And you're like, okay, well, I had 2 people in mind, but I guess I'm not going to say anything. Okay, reductio ad Jesus, that's fine. Yeah.
So what I would have said is the Final Four. Like, it's the NCAA's great gift to America.
That's true.
In March.
Yeah.
And a little bit into April, let's be honest. But regardless, I mean, we have made it, and let us hope one day, Pod Quad Nation, that we might be seen, this 4th episode might be seen as just as important, well, maybe just a little bit less than what Father Nate suggested. And well, let's say just as important is what I proposed. How do you feel about that?
That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
All right, so the good news here is, speaking of athletics, we have an incredible guest with us.
We're super psyched. And this is actually another Pete, which I'm a little struggling here. Like, what am I going to call? Is this Pete and Pete? Pete 1, Pete 2?
Yeah, I think we got to go with the Pete and repeat. I mean, he's Pete, I'll be repeat. But, like I think in all instances, whenever we bring in a guest, we should demonstrate utter hospitality. So
that's right.
We should not extend this because he will not understand why you're calling him Pete and me repeat. But all of you on the inside, you're all on the inside of this joke.
This is the easy part because there's only one Father Pete on campus. Everybody knows who Father Pete is.
Thank you.
So that I think we got an easy one, and we're really excited about this. This is going to be a great conversation. He's such a good guy.
Seriously. And so much to offer. Really looking forward to having this convo.
So insightful. Let's get to it. So welcome to Pete Bevacqua, our athletic director, who has a notable career in both media and athletics. This past March, he became the vice president and James E. Rohr director of athletics. Before that, Pete had a role as the CEO of the PGA and the chairman of NBC Sports, where he oversaw an array of assets, including NBC Olympics, the Golf Channel, and NBC Sports Digital. Did I get that all right?
You did, yep.
Nice. Well, welcome, Pete. Glad you're here.
No, it's great to be here, Father Nate and Father Pete. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Pete. We can't thank you enough for joining us in the midst of everything that's going on with the start of a semester and everything else. But we wanted to just start this off by saying, hey, look, you're a 1993 graduate yourself, and you've had, as Father Nate has alluded to, a storied career thus far that's taken you many places not at the University of Notre Dame. And so now coming back in this new capacity as athletic director, I'm really interested to know, what have you noticed that's the same about Notre Dame, and what frankly has changed?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, 93 grad. I grew up all things Notre Dame.
Yeah.
My father was a 1955 grad. I have 4 older sisters. My oldest sister went to St. Mary's. 2 of my other sisters went to Notre Dame. One married a professor, and she teaches at ECDC here. So I grew up. Notre Dame's the only school I applied to.
Yeah.
I was always going to go to Notre Dame, and luckily for me, I got in. Back in the late 80s, which was easier then than it is now. Mickey Kidder has told me over and over. So much is the same in kind of what is the true identity of the university, what's important, what Notre Dame stands for, what it means to be a student athlete, which is getting harder and harder. When I see recruits, regardless of the sport, and talk to them, I'm like, hey, you have to come into Notre Dame with eyes wide open because we're going to give you every resource you can possibly have to succeed athletically. Best coaches, best facilities, but you're going to be a student. and we're going to give you all those resources academically. But if you're not prepared to be a Notre Dame student, Notre Dame is not the place for you. And that was the same in 1993, where, if you're an athlete, you were among the student population and you were a true part of the university. So that element of what has stayed the same has been so great to see, because that has become more and more difficult to maintain.
Yep.
With transfer portal and name, image, and likeness and everything that's going in this modernization of college sports. What's changed is, first of all, the size of the university, not from a student population standpoint, but just the physical size of the campus.
Yeah.
Now I've been lucky because I've always come back to Notre Dame a few times a year for games, for meetings. I've stayed involved with the university. But Doug Marsh told me recently that in the early 90s, I think we had 2.1 million square feet of buildings.
Yeah.
Now we're at 5.3 million square feet.
Wow.
If we were back here in 1993,
unbelievable.
first of all, this didn't exist.
Nope.
We didn't have Crossroads. We had our, the Notre Dame Stadium. This campus kind of ended at the stadium. So all of that has changed, certainly the size and scope of the university. I think the student population has become more international, which I think is great to see. I mean, Notre Dame has always been such a national university, but now it's truly an international powerhouse.
Yeah.
But so I think Notre Dame is modernized. I think the financial health of the university is stronger now than it's ever been before when you look at the endowment. But what makes Notre Dame has stayed the same.
Yeah.
And that's encouraging. So to be able to modernize and to be among the very best universities, not just in the country, but in the world, but yet stay true to what Notre Dame is. When I came here, I lived in Sorin for all 4 years, and we had the president of the university lived in the dorm, Monk Malloy, played monk hoops with Monk twice a week for 4 years. Now the president of the university, Father Bob, lives in Kavanaugh Hall. So, some things don't change, and I think that's great.
Before Nate gets to his next question, one of the things that I have noticed in the midst of this, Nate is football chaplain, I'm hoops chaplain, is the level of resources that you have to wrap around a student athlete today.
Yeah.
In order to compete at this level, it just requires this constant investment. But what I really appreciated was you have to make decisions from some place. And so rooting it in the mission, allowing that core to continue to inform, and so as to confidently evolve.
Yeah, I think we have our North Star, and whether I'm talking to Father Bob or Father John before him, or our trustees, or really anyone, what are your priorities? What are your biggest challenges? And of course, you want to win a national championship in football. You want to win a national championship in basketball. I know you had Niel on your podcast. I feel really good about what we'll do on the women's basketball side of things next year. But I think the biggest challenge, the biggest priority for me is maintaining what it means to be a student athlete in the modern college sports landscape. And the pressures on the athletes now, even from when I was here in the early 90s, it's night and day. It's all consuming, social media, NIL. The days of even, sitting in Sorin Hall with the very best athletes on campus, and at night having pizza and nachos with Michael Stonebreaker, like those days are over. Now it's what do you do? What do you do for nutrition? What do you do for sports science and sports data?
Yep.
It is so difficult to be a student at Notre Dame. To be a student athlete at Notre Dame is so challenging, because these student athletes, we have almost 750 student athletes on campus. They really have no free time between keeping up with what you have to do with the rigors of being a student at Notre Dame and all the challenges of being successful as an athlete at Notre Dame. You combine those, and I am so impressed with these young men and women. And that's who we are. And I always say, I'll feel like I failed that if you walk back on campus 2, 3, 5 years from now, and you feel as though you've entered into a segregated campus. And by that, I mean the students are over there and the athletes are on the other side of campus, and they don't interact, then we've failed. And I always love to talk, when I talk to student athletes, which is one of my favorite parts of this job, is having them come into my office and just having conversations with them, where they're from, what their major is, what they want to do. And inevitably, I'll work into the conversation, like, tell me, who are your best friends on campus? And if you're a football player, you'll get, if they say 10 friends, 5 of them will be on the football team, maybe a couple of guys on the basketball team, but almost without exception, they'll name, a philosophy major, a math major, a kid who plays the trumpet in the band, somebody who's never picked up a ball, thrown a ball. And that's the Notre Dame experience.
Right on. Right.
That, you're going to have those wonderful moments as part of your team, but you're going to interact with this national, international student body, and those relationships are going to serve you well for the rest of your life. We can't lose sight of that.
Right on.
I love that. And I think that really speaks to the strength of Notre Dame's dorm system, right? Just kind of putting everybody together. I mean, Pete and I have both done weddings for folks, on these teams. And you see the wedding parties of like, oh, this is a guy in my dorm. This is one of my teammates. And just the way that those come together.
Well, you just did Ian Book's wedding, right?
Yeah.
So you told me a funny story about that. But absolutely. I mean, your dorm life, like I said, I was in Soren for 4 years. And, I had a group of 5 or 6 of us. Mm-hmm. And we're still best friends to this day. And people say, well, how often do you talk to them? And it's no exaggeration. We're on a text chain with each other, and I probably have gotten or shared 25 texts this morning.
Wow.
I mean, that's the nature of it. And those are the relationships and the bonds you build here that last you your whole life.
That's awesome. That's an aggressive text chain.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm also in an interesting position.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose.
They're trying to ask, trying to get the inside scoop.
So you've had all these really big and interesting jobs at the PGA and NBC and now at Notre Dame. When you think about transitioning to a new place, what are things that you think about? What's your approach to that? And how do you build trust with folks and contribute to a culture without breaking it?
Yeah, and each transition has been different. What I experienced when I went to the PGA of America as the CEO versus what I experienced at NBC versus coming here to Notre Dame. They're all very different organizations. Mm-hmm. But I think the traits of each are similar. And my approach, I think, with each has been similar. First, not to pat myself on the back, but I'm comfortable with what I don't know. First, I don't make pretend I have all the answers. So I think some people come into a job at a leadership level and it's kind of like, hey, it's my way or the highway. That's not my approach. When I was going to the PGA of America, I spent the better part of the first few months, really just listening and getting to know the place. Same thing with NBC, and I had the added advantage here, thanks to Notre Dame and Father John at the time and Jack Brennan and Jack Swarbrick with this transition period. So when I entered the PGA of America, starting day one, hey, you're the CEO. NBC Sports, hey, you're running NBC Sports. So you kind of had to dive right into it. Here it was, no, Jack's the AD. We have set up this transition, learn, listen, see Jack in action, build relationships with key people on campus. So I kind of had an 8-month head start on just trying to figure it out because I had never been an AD before. And Jack Swarbrick, to his credit, just welcomed me with open arms and was a good friend before this and, will certainly be, an unbelievable resource and friend for me going forward. But I'd like to think, Father Nate, I'm approachable. I am, like I said, I'm very comfortable in kind of drafting off of the expertise of others. I like surrounding myself with people that have different experiences, are far more attuned and have greater levels of expertise in certain areas than I ever could. I mean, for instance, to analogize it, if you're Marcus Freeman, you want Mike Denbrock to have more offensive knowledge than you have. And you want Al Golden or Marty Biaggi, who's the special teams coordinator. You can't be kind of the person for everything. And I think people feel that when they're around me that, hey, listen, I'm not going to make pretend I have it all figured out because I don't. We're in this together. Let's get to know each other. And then I get a sense of, okay, what's going well? What could we be doing better? Where do we need to step it up? And that to me needs to be, you don't want to waste time, but you want to be gradual. You want to be strategic. You really want to be very wary of the culture, aware of the culture of an organization, what's working, what's not working, because cultural changes can sometimes be the most difficult. The benefit I've had here, in addition to the transition, is the culture of our team was already so strong. Credit to Jack Swarbrick, credit to the head coaches and our senior staff. it is a really dedicated group of people that know why we're here ultimately, to serve the university and to serve those student athletes.
Jack's been so fun to work with, and he'll be very excited to see that I have Under Armour shoes on. He's like to give me a hard time about my choice of footwear on the sideline. So Jack's just an awesome person. I'm glad you had that runway with him too.
Yeah, and it was great because I knew Jack again, through NBC. But even before I was at NBC, because you mentioned some of our partners, but obviously one of NBC Sports' key partners is Notre Dame football. So I got to know Jack really well through those 6 years. And, but then to just the level of conversations I had with him, he involved me in everything right off the bat. And just, some of my favorite moments with Jack was just when it was the two of us in his office or in my office at the end of the day, where you'd see everything else that he was interested in. Like an unbelievable encyclopedic knowledge of music and all different styles of music. And obviously, Kimberly and his family. He's a special guy.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So Pete, the first time I met you, I was walking in to La Fortune to get a haircut right across.
Well, I certainly wasn't getting a haircut. I'm self-administered. You guys both have all this hair.
So
I wasn't in the barber shop. Right?
No, you were cruising right through. But I thought to myself, like, here I had read about you, and all of a sudden I was like, there he is. And I never thought that I would meet you like right across from the barber shop and the Taco Bell, that would be the spot. But it also served as a reminder of your approach. Like I thought, the only place you're ever going to see him is over at the Jack or maybe at the Dome. But the fact that you're kind of walking through a very normal spot also speaks to your leadership style and the philosophy and the approach that you bring to the table. You mentioned in your response to Nate just a moment ago that you do a lot of listening. And I'd love to hear a bit more. What do you listen for? And specifically, not just to hear, but as an approach to leadership that ultimately establishes trust, that builds culture, that really gives people the confidence that even though there's a sizable change that has occurred, that there's still an opportunity here and really great reason for optimism.
Well, I love to get people talking. And usually, and I think it's always helpful in a small setting. And really, what I first like to know is I like to know about them. Like, where are they from? What's their, everybody has a Notre Dame story. Maybe you were recruited here because you were a 5-star quarterback, or because you wanted to major in X, Y, or Z, or because, Notre Dame's Notre Dame, or you have a family connection. So I love learning that about a particular person, any person. And just, what have you been doing? What have you seen that's worked? Where are areas where you think we could be doing more? I also always try to invite people, whatever your expert, maybe you're in ticketing and sales. That doesn't mean you can't have an idea about what we do during game day in terms of events. Maybe you've been here for 40 years. Maybe you started last week, making sure everybody feels comfortable sharing their ideas. I also try to get across, and to use a sports analogy, you can't be afraid to get hit by the pitch. And I tell that to our team. I tell that to staff people when we're meeting one-on-one all the time. Like, if you're up at bat and you're afraid to get hit by the pitch, you're not going to get a hit. You're going to freeze. And shame on us at the end of the year if we batted 1,000, because it probably means we were way too tentative. We weren't aggressive enough. We weren't trying enough things. We weren't being progressive enough. So I really try to understand, okay, where has this person felt like he or she has succeeded? Where is there other areas or opportunities that they'd like to be involved in? Do they have some ideas within their own group or other groups? With coaches, it's, what's going well? How can I help you? And really building a relationship with people, whether it's a student athlete, a coach, a fellow staff member, president of the university, one of the trustees, a dean, one of the professors. And, what I'll start in this fall is I'm going to do a series of breakfasts with student athletes.
Nice.
Just once every 2 weeks. Maybe it's a Tuesday or Wednesday morning. We're still deciding on the idea. Just me, and sign up for it.
It's awesome.
And it's not just the captains and the superstars. I want to hear from everybody. And you get people in a room and just start talking, and great ideas come from that. And I'm doing the same thing with staff. Once every 2 weeks, have a Tuesday lunch with staff. kind of randomly put with me 7 or 8 people at a time. And I'll start those by going around the room and saying, Nate, where are you from?
Yep.
Pete, where are you from?
Yep.
How'd you get to Notre Dame? Tell me about your area. And once people get comfortable and kind of let their guard down and start talking, that's when you learn a lot about each other. And, I love walking around campus. At night, I run around campus. I'll do a route around
I've seen you on St.
a
Mary's
route around the 2 lakes. And it's just a great way to kind of see people and kind of see what's going on. And, I think the student athletes already, I hope they feel like I just love when they come into my office and talk. And, just about anything. And you talk about going into different organizations. One of the first things in the PGA of America. So the PGA of America, 28,000 members,
Jeez.
PGA professionals from all around the country. And I noticed quickly at the PGA of America that there was a disconnect between the staff and the membership as a whole. And there was a feeling, rightly or wrongly, that the staff was concerned about the high-profile things the PGA of America did, the PGA Championship, the Ryder Cup, dealing with the Tiger Woods and the Rory McIlroys of the world. And I said the first thing we have to do is change that. We're here to serve our members. Our members have to feel like we're here at work for them.
Yep.
So one of the easiest tangible examples, and something that would always drive me crazy, is when I would travel around and go to a golf course, a golf facility, and walk in, usually with a young assistant pro, he or she would always say, "Oh, Mr. Bevacqua, great to meet you." And I would kind of stop that person in their tracks and say, "I'm not Mr. Bevacqua, I'm Pete. Like, I'm here, I work for you. I'm not Mr. Bevacqua."
Yeah.
And, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but I do the same thing with the student athletes. Like, I don't want them to call me Mr. Bevacqua. And a lot of them do. But, you guys, it's Father Pete, it's Father Nate. I'm Pete, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of my style. And that's just, you got to be who you are. And that's who I am.
I love that answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking of our buddy Father Jerry is really good about inviting people to meals and getting to know folks.
Yes.
Like
He
the guys in his
invited me
dorm.
right out of the gate.
There you go.
Went over to Corby and had a great lunch with him. And it's, you can sit down with somebody for 45 minutes or an hour and you really get to know them.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Okay, so one of the things that you had to do in your job then and now is negotiate stuff. And like you had big negotiations here. And, most people won't have negotiations at that level, but I think everybody can relate to this idea of like, 2 people who really want something and kind of competing interests, right? So what would be your advice when you're thinking about what's the most important thing when you're doing big or even day-to-day negotiations?
Yeah, I think it's do your homework. So always go in super prepared. Like, you don't want to be surprised by anything. Again, surround yourself with people you trust and people that are smart. And, know what you want to achieve. And, my negotiation style, and it's different for different people. Sometimes, some people, it's kind of attack mode. Go and kind of take everything and burn down the bridges. Like, that's
Doesn't seem like your style.
no, it's not my style. I mean, hey, you want what's best. I wanted what's best for the PGA of America, what was best for NBC Sports, what's best for Notre Dame. But you want the other side to feel good about it too. Yeah. And, the NBC negotiation. So here I was, went from NBC Sports, left in June, started here in July.
Oh, that must have been so bizarre.
And September, we're renegotiating the NBC deal. And it was,
You like seeing all your buddies like,
well, it was literally like saying, Mike Denbrock in the middle of a game, okay, go over to the other side of the field and go run their offense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but again, it was that common ground, like you want the negotiation to end where both sides feel good about it. Both sides feel like they got what they needed and maybe a little bit more. And also both sides are a little disappointed that they didn't get a little bit more, And because when you strike these partnerships, and the NBC one's a perfect example, I knew NBC wanted to get the deal done. I knew Notre Dame wanted to get the deal done. What's the common ground? We want to be partners. So we have to come out of this feeling good about it because we're going to be partners for at least the next 6 years. And we've been partners for 33 years. And that's my approach is, treat the people with respect. You always have to be honest, because the people that blow themselves up in business and in negotiations are people that have a bad reputation, and they're out there. You know, and if you feel like you can trust a person on the other side of the table and that they can trust you, and you're not trying to fool them or pull the wool over their eyes, and just kind of have that open dialogue where you're both kind of rooting to get something done. And in some negotiations, it's a lot easier than others, but that's always kind of been my style. Where's the common ground? What can we do? What do we absolutely need? Let's make sure we get that. Let's do what's in the best interest of now, you know, Notre Dame. And I felt like we ended up with an NBC deal that is really terrific for us and for them, because if it's not working for them, that partnership is going to suffer. It's going to become awkward, and that's not good business for us. That's not good for them. Same thing with Under Armour. Same thing with our other big partnerships. And went through it again. You know, what's occupied so much of my time the last 2 to 3 months was the new CFP deal. And now here you are dealing with ESPN, which is a key partner of ours, and the Power 5 commissioners, really now the Power 4 commissioners. With the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC, with the Pac-12 obviously going to the Pac-2. But that was a really fascinating time and a fascinating negotiation. And again, doing what's best for Notre Dame, making sure that we came out of this CFP negotiation with two things. We needed the revenue that Notre Dame requires, and we're there. And we needed the protection from an access standpoint, and we have it. But also we're in a unique position because we're in this room with all of these commissioners, and we're one university. And I've often I went back, remember, and talking to Father John about it, and then subsequently Father Bob. I said, you know, we're in that room. I feel like we're Switzerland, but if Switzerland had a really big army. And that's kind of how we approach it. Like we kind of were the, you know, the voice of reason and a little bit sometimes the tiebreaker in those conversations. But you always had to respect our position in there, who we were, what we stood for, and realizing that, hey, we're in this room because Notre Dame is special and Notre Dame football is special.
That's awesome. Now, Pete, not a lot of people know this, but because of that contract, the Pod Quad will go on to NBC primetime.
That's right.
They don't know it yet.
You're going to replace Lester Holt. We're going to announce that our first home game.
Fake news.
All right, so here's the question. You provided an awesome image, one that I'm totally stealing and bringing back with me to campus ministry. This notion of not being afraid to get hit by the pitch. You know, look at, if someone were to read your resume on Wikipedia, it reads as the who's who, the what's what of leadership in America in the modern age. Could you talk a little bit about failure? Because oftentimes it can be read as such, like, man, you've come to this and you've had just a really graced experience. But based upon what you've just said, suggests to me that you've encountered failure. And so to me, you don't need to go through the laundry list of ways that you failed, but how do you incorporate failure as a part of your leadership style?
Yeah, and it goes back to what I said. If we're batting 1,000, shame on us.
Yeah.
Now you don't want to strike out every time you get to the
That's
plate
right.
either,
That's
right?
right.
So I always say to people, like, listen, we're gonna make mistakes. And as strange as this sounds, like, I want to make mistakes, right? Because we're gonna learn from those. And if you make mistakes and you don't learn anything from it, kind of, well, that was a total waste of time.
Right on. That's right.
But there have been plenty of things. I think back to my time at the PGA of America where, you know, I'd wake up one morning and say, hey, we ought to try this. And what I've noticed with failure is I think a lot of organization and a lot of leaders fail when they become too proud to admit that they're about to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And kind of like, well, I said we were going to do it, so we better do it, because if we backtrack now, people are going to think, you know, I don't have the kind of the guts to see it through. Or they're going to think, you know, oh my God, all of a sudden, why is he changing course? I wonder what that means. But I think I've had plenty of moments, whether it was at NBC saying, hey, we ought to try to go pursue this entity to be their broadcast partner, or at the PGA of America, have we thought, let's go do this. A perfect example, PGA of America, I'll talk about a real life example. I felt, so the PGA Championship's one of the 4 majors of golf. There's the Masters, the US Open, the PGA Championship, and the Open Championship, the British Open. 4 biggest events in golf. The PGA Championship, if I always said when I was there, for being honest with ourselves, is the 4th of the 4 in terms of prestige. We had the Ryder Cup, which is great, one of the biggest events in sports. But I liked being the underdog. And I said, let's use that to our advantage because we can be hungry. We can try some things that others won't try. The Masters wouldn't try because they don't have to. But we can make some noise. We can do some things differently. So I convinced myself that if we had the PGA Championship and held it at an international location twice every decade, over the course of 30 years, we could position it as golf's global major.
Nice.
Well, that's what I thought. And I fell in love with this idea. Like, this is going to do it. And I remember talking to the board about it and then talking to the senior staff. And a couple of them saying, yeah, but have you thought about that? Have you thought about who the PGA of America members are? That it's the PGA, the economic impact to different communities and states and sections of the PGA. The idea, I think, had merit, but the execution of it would have failed.
Yeah.
And so I think I had the self-awareness to back off. And so don't be afraid to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. And don't be too proud to admit you're about to make a mistake and change course.
Right on.
And again, I think that's why it comes down to so much like who you surround yourself with.
That's right.
And I'll always tell people, particularly in my direct reports, like what drives me crazy is when I think somebody's telling me yes when they don't believe it. Right? If somebody's saying, oh yeah, Pete, that's a great idea, we ought to do that, and I can tell in their eyes they think I'm being a fool or about to make a horrible mistake. Like they owe it to the university, they owe it to me, they owe it to the organization. Like I love when people just attack an idea, chew it up, spit it out. That'll make us better. It'll make us smarter. It'll make us stronger. And every good idea I've been a part of at any organization, like it started looking like one thing and ended up looking totally different and better and smarter and positioned for success.
Right on. Yeah, it reminds me of the Emperor's New Clothes, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
no, if no one tells the Emperor,
Yeah.
then how effective can you be?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't surround yourself with yes people.
Right.
Whether you're the head coach of Notre Dame football, the president of Notre Dame, in any of our roles, like you need people who are going to be honest with you and not afraid to say, hey, Pete, you're being stupid.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the position that you occupy does not come with a crystal ball.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I always appreciate it. My approach in this realm is to only be friends with people who are smarter than me, and then they just pull you up, and they're
well, I mean, again, you talk about your career. Like I learned that early on. So, I went to law school at another university that we won't name.
You can say it, Georgetown.
Georgetown. And then was all of a sudden at work at a big law firm in New York, Davis Polk, and I was there for 4 years. I probably knew within the first month, like, okay, great law firm, great people, but like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. But what I learned at Davis Polk from the partners who were really succeeding at Davis Polk is they realized, to your point, like there's he or she down the hall, like they're an expert in this area. So I could like make pretend I'm an expert, or I could go down the hall to Father Pete's office and say, hey, we have this complicated international tax issue. So, yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you're the smartest guy in the world, but there's more things where you're not, no matter who you are. And bring those experiences. Surround yourself with those people who have those different experiences, different skill sets, quite frankly, different views of the world that are just going to make you smarter.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things that's really important about athletics, and one of the things that's most beautiful about it is I think it can be an entree into the larger life of the university, right? Like this is the history of Notre Dame football, kind of really bringing the university to national prominence and then using that to become a place of international excellence and prominence. As you think about our aspirations to have athletics be at the highest level, what do you think the role of faith is in that vision?
Yeah, I think, Father Nate, for Notre Dame, it's such a differentiator. I think Notre Dame isn't for everybody. And to me, we have to be honest about that. And that's why when I talk to recruits, you have to know where you're getting into in Notre Dame. It's hard here.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard here. You're going to come to Notre Dame. You're going to be a full-time student. You're going to be a full-time athlete. You're going to live in a dorm. And the weather gets tricky here certain times of year. And our faith is also a part of that. And, I remember having a great conversation with Marcus about, not everybody on the football team, not everybody at Notre Dame is Roman Catholic.
Right.
And, because you say the Mass. We have a team Mass every Saturday before the game. We're here, we do it at the Basilica. When we're traveling, we do it in the hotel. And I remember saying to Marcus, what do you tell the players that aren't Catholic? And he's like, hey, this is part of Notre Dame. It's what makes Notre Dame special. Regardless of your religion, use this as a moment to get closer with your teammates. Use this as a moment of self-awareness, as introspection, as a time of peace, which we don't have. We don't have that time where you can just think for a half an hour to 45 minutes. And I think that faith element is what makes Notre Dame Notre Dame. Yeah. Without it, we're not Notre Dame. We would still be a big time school with a big time football program. But I think, when it comes to faith, I think we lead with our chin, right? I mean, we don't apologize. We don't hide from it. That's who we are. We embrace it. It impacts everything we do.
Absolutely. Whether
it's the pregame Mass, whether it's your roles for the men's basketball team or the football team, whether it's how we leave the locker room, the Our Father that you lead us in at the end of every game, whether we've won or lost. There's many things that make the DNA of Notre Dame, but that's the essential ingredient is, what's our mission? And if you look at the strategic plan that Notre Dame has now that, obviously the leadership and John McGreevy, our provost, put together with Father John and Father Bob. I mean, it's all about the Catholicism of Notre Dame and being truly not the best institution in the world in higher education, but the best Catholic institutions for higher learning. What does that mean? How does that impact everything we do? And that's inescapable here. And, but you don't need to be, I'm Catholic. You guys are obviously Catholic, but
I just converted though.
Yeah,
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
But you don't need to be here. And you don't feel, because I've had plenty of friends who are here, who've been students here, plenty of athletes who are not Catholic, and they don't feel like outsiders.
That's right.
They feel like part of an extended family. And that's, you feel that the minute you come set foot on this campus.
That's awesome.
So I'll wrap it up here. If you were to offer Pod Quad Nation one piece of advice, that
other than changing the name, which we've talked about a little bit.
Beyond changing the name,
I won't mention the names. I won't mention the names we talked about.
What would it be?
The advice?
Yeah.
In terms of the podcast, or in terms of
just
like
in general.
Even the best piece of advice you've received from somebody else that you want to pass along.
What I always say to two things come to mind that have kind of steered me. One, professionally, somebody told me early on, somebody I really respect, take what you do very seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously.
I love that.
And we all know people that take themselves a little too seriously, right? And, I live by that. Like, we had a meeting earlier today with the team, senior team, talking about a difficult, complex issue. Mm-hmm. But, we were lighthearted at moments where you could be lighthearted. Right. And people are more creative and willing to share their ideas. If you go into a meeting and it's, doom and gloom and seriousness and, and there's times to be incredibly serious. Take what we do seriously. Let's not take ourselves too seriously. I love that. And then, I remember, my parents would always kind of preach, and this is an interesting one for me. Never feel like you're better than anybody, but don't ever feel like anybody's better than you. Yeah. And that to me has always been something I've whether you're dealing with the head of a country or somebody who has a job that just started on campus, like you're not better than anybody, but also particularly when I was younger and going into those roles at a young age, at the CEO of the PGA of America or NBC Sports. I think the way I was raised in Notre Dame education, I never felt overwhelmed by the moment.
Yep.
And those two things, like taking what you do seriously, not yourself too seriously, don't be arrogant, but don't be intimidated. Those to me are kind of how I try to live my life.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, Pete.
Oh, you're welcome.
Pete, thanks so much for your time.
having me.
Thanks for being on the
Thanks,
podcast.
Father Nate.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Father
Thank you.
Pete.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. The juice box. All right, Pete, what about that conversation brought you juice?
I'll tell you what's totally juicing me up right now is Pete's insight about the fact that you can't be afraid to take a hit. I must admit that I can oftentimes be a perfectionist, not only in my personal life, but also in the way that I lead. And so as a result, I can be rather skittish in terms of the ways that we think about creative projects in campus ministry, or even myself thinking about like, oh man, what happens if this gets interpreted wrongly? And for Pete to actually name taking that courageous step and being really thoughtful and intentional about it was really freeing to me. And so that's something that's firing me up. And I want to spend a lot of time thinking about, years ago, I did an executive MBA. And one of the things that they always said at the end of every single weekend when you're in class is you should be able to take something from this class and apply it to your job on Monday. And that's totally something I'm taking with me beyond this conversation.
Yeah, I love that notion of just freedom, like the
Yes.
freedom to fail and just to learn from that always. And he had a nice, caveat there, right? Like you can fail, but you got to learn from that.
Totally right.
Yeah.
Totally right. Yeah, to have that ability to say, well, that's how learning occurs. I was just having a conversation with my dad the other day. He said, look, the things that I know now are the result of me walking into a store and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes we can see people at whatever end of the curve that suggests like they've just always known this.
Yeah.
It just leaks out of them somehow. But yet at the same time, like they too have been on this journey of trying to figure things out a bit more. How about yourself?
All right. So what brought me juice?
Yes.
I mean, so many things. Pete is such a fascinating guy. And he's so he has interesting things to say, these interesting experiences. He's worked at the highest level on all these things.
Yeah.
And yet he's so approachable. And I think that was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
Is not, I mean, cool stories, like really
No doubt.
neat. And he's so thoughtful about recognizing other people. I really liked the way that he looked at, to Jack Schwarbrick and appreciated what other people have done for him. I think that stance of gratitude is amazing. The thing that I think struck me the most, though, are two things. One, his authenticity, right? Like what you see is what you get with that guy.
Right on.
And he talked about how important that was in business and negotiations. That's really, really, I think, something for all of us to think about. Like, yeah, just be yourself and be authentic. And the second thing, and I think this is so important, is that virtue of humility. I love what he said at the end about like, you're no better and you're no worse, right? And I think that's a great invitation for us to think about like, we're created in the image and likeness of God. And like all of us have that inherent dignity that we have to celebrate, that we've got to and remember in ourselves too, right? Like that, hey, we're not like, above other people, but we're not below them too. And I think there's so many invitations into that, into believing in ourselves. And we all know, which tendency we might have.
Right on.
Right? To overshoot or undershoot our identity. But the most core and central thing is we can hold on to that identity as beloved children of God. And I mean, that's giving me juice all day.
Yeah. And what I love about that approach is that I don't know about you, but I can say for myself, for sure, his posture and demeanor opened me up to a different type of conversation. That there was a freedom even in speaking with him that because of his own humility, it allowed for us, I think, to go deeper than we otherwise could have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great insight.
Well, listen, man, thank you so much for this great conversation. It's been so fun to have it with you, and certainly with the man, the myth, the legend, Pete Bevacqua, who was sitting right here just a few moments ago.
We'll see you on the quad.